Awesome. All right. Well, hey everybody. I'm Andrew Dickson from Drips, and I work on research there. And I'm just super psyched to be here with all of you today. Filecoin is and protocol labs in general, I think is one of the most exciting. I've been in this space since 2017, and I think that you all have really built some of the most infrastructural and interesting and successful pieces in all of sort of crypto and Web3. So really excited to be here with so many smart people and share a little bit about what we've been working on with Drips. So I'll jump right into it. Maybe I'll just mention, this talk is about continuous dependency funding, which is kind of like our mechanism. It's maybe similar to retro PGF. It's the mechanism. Maybe it's a little bit more general, and then Drips is the implementation. It's a set of smart contracts in a web app that implements the mechanism. So as a little bit of background, some of you have been talking about this, but in recent years, the Ethereum ecosystem has established a cultural norm of funding public goods. And I think, as Juan was alluding to, this is super interesting because you haven't had this in a lot of other areas, like in the private sector, governments fund public goods, but this emergence of a public goods ecosystem in Ethereum, I think, is really unique and exciting and has a ton of potential upside. So these are some of the projects that kind of inspired our work. Optimism, Protocol Guild, and Gitcoin. They've raised a tremendous amount of funding for Web3 public goods, and I think what they've done was just super inspiring and exciting for us as we set out to build Drips. And as we did that, we also reached out to a lot of users, especially last year. We talked to a lot of users as we were building Drips V2. And the users were both, funders, like folks at Optimism and Protocol Guild, and also recipients, folks, developers, open source software developers in the ecosystem. And we got a lot of input from them. Some of the sort of features that they mentioned from the existing mechanisms that were sometimes challenges for them were the round-based nature. A lot of folks that received funds, they received a lot of funds in the rounds, but then they also mentioned that they weren't sure when funds were coming next, so it made it hard for them to kind of plan their development based on that. Should they spend them all at once, or should they treat them sort of more like an endowment? Sometimes require significant overhead for reviewers. I think, a lot of us who have followed retro PGF have seen how intense some of the round processes have become, and I think there's a lot of good conversation that happens there, but it also becomes more of a process for more of a time investment for reviewers, and can sometimes, I think, especially in the recent round, turn a popularity contest for recipients as well. Is a concern that we've heard, and then finally, just hard for recipients to plan their futures around. This is kind of similar to the round-based thing, but when you don't know when the funds are coming next, or if they are, then that can be a challenge for open source devs who often don't. There are really not many of them interested in getting rich. It's kind of passion project style work for many of these devs, but they do have bills to pay, and so many of them think more in terms of just like paying rent or other bills. So when we built continuous dependency funding, we tried to solve some of these kind of requests or concerns, and so continuous dependency funding, like the name says, it's continuous. So we built on a new Web3 primitive called streams that was, I think, introduced by Sablier a few years ago, but now a number of implementations have been built. With Drips, we have an integrated streaming system. We also, one of the primitives that's come up a lot when we looking at this space, I think, Protocol Guild is this, but retro PGF has seen more and more of this. But we have this idea of lists of public goods that folks are curating, and then others are talking about, maybe reusing. And so this is, with Drips, this is just baked right in. There are publicly fundable lists as a basic component of Drips that anyone can reuse and anyone can fund. Editable by maintainers any time. This is another kind of key feature where, again, instead of the round-based thing, we thought we really wanted continuous dependency funding to work in the present, so it doesn't work in the past or the future. I mean, you can choose to base what you want to fund in the past or the future, but you can sort of always, as a team, as a funder, you can always change your mind for what you want to value at the current moment. And then finally, by virtue of the streaming, it creates more predictable income for recipients. So, solving some of that sort of desire from the dev side. So let's jump in a little bit more to how it works. So it starts with a funder. This might be a DAO or another organization. They accumulate fees, revenues, or assets, and then members choose a percentage to be continuously allocated to critical dependencies. And really for this, we're mostly thinking about free and open source software dependencies in terms of the public goods that folks are funding. That's, Drips has specific advantages for that, but these could be any recipients. We've seen some researchers be funded, and even other types of public goods could be funded. So the second part is members of the DAO collaboratively curate a list or a number of different lists if they want of critical dependencies that they believe are impactful to their operations. And this is deliberately somewhat left open and modular. But what we've seen the most so far is for teams to for the core maintainers to basically say, these are the projects that we feel that we depend on the most when they decide on what's going to be in their list. As I mentioned, decisions on modifying the list or adjusting allocation can be made anytime, so the list can change. And this here is an actual kind of little snippet from the web app. This is a project called Octant that probably almost everyone here is familiar with. It's a kind of meta public goods kind of aggregator in the Ethereum space, and they do some funding. And these are their actual live dependencies in the Drips web app. You can see that they've dripped about 50K to these critical dependencies. The first one I believe is Protocol Guild, but the others are GitHub repositories and Web3 Pi, Flask, WAGMI. And then the final step is that as dependencies are onboarded into the system, they're actually prompted when they receive the funds to create their own lists of dependencies. And this creates a global dependency graph created by people in real time. And I think in the long run, this is the part of the mechanism that we're actually the most excited about, because for those of you that are familiar with the Nebraska person problem, this really sort of aims to solve that problem of how do we fund, I think several others have mentioned this so far, but the idea of these deep dependencies in the dependency tree that, as developers, we all sort of struggle to find out how to find and fund them. I think of things like Core.js, if you all are familiar with that story from last year. So now I kind of want to show what it looks like in action. These are actually, again, little fragments from the actual live Drips web app. This is all sort of live data. And this is actually our team's dependency list in the Drips web app. So you can see in September of last year, the Radworks DAO became the first DAO to do a proposal. They funded all of the different orgs that are part of the Radworks ecosystem for about $1 million streamed over a year. And you can see here are the Drips dependencies, the GitHub repos, and about $250,000 have been streamed so far to these different repos. It's kind of cut off there, but it goes on. And yeah, so this is kind of what the app looks like from the funder's point of view. And then this is the recipient's view. So this is probably almost everyone here is familiar with Rick Moo and Ethers.js. This is his profile in the Drips app. And you can see he's received about 30K. You can see his supporters, and you can see who he's splitting to. He's splitting 40% to his dependencies. And this 40% number is something that's quite interesting that has emerged as a norm. And we're really excited about it because I think maybe Juan made me think of it a little bit in his talk earlier. How can we get people to think about giving bigger percentages to public goods rather than these really small percentages that you typically think about? But you can also see other projects that are supporting Rick Moo. You've got Open Zeppelin, Gemforge, and the Drips Network app. And so this is kind of what it looks like from the recipient view. So maybe now why Drips? I mean, I've talked a little bit about why we think Drips is cool, but I want to really zoom in on some of the key features that we think differentiates it from some of the just what makes it new and exciting, I suppose. Then the first thing is it's the simplest way to fund any GitHub repo. So this is something that we've gotten really positive feedback from everyone on, but you might have noticed in some of the shots of drip lists that I've been showing, instead of Ethereum addresses, it's actually showing these GitHub repo names. And so what's going on there? So one of the things we built is a built-in, so there's a very flexible identity system in Drips. And Drips accounts can be, they don't have to be just Ethereum addresses. They can be Ethereum addresses, they can be NFTs, but they can also actually be GitHub repositories, can actually control accounts in Drips. And it's an extensible system, so there could be many other types of account holders. But one of the coolest ones is this. It's a Chainlink based. I won't go through all the technical details, but it's backed by a Chainlink Oracle. And the end result of what it allows you to do is you can stream funds directly to a GitHub repository without that developer having to be actually onboarded into Web3. And this is something that came from talking to Jonas and the team at Optimism. We asked them, what were your biggest pain points in doing funding? And they said, well, I think at that time they were only funding like 30 projects. And they're like, even for 30, we had to reach out and actually onboard a lot of these people one by one. Incredibly painful process. And particularly when they've like never used, in some cases, Ethereum before or any crypto. And this obviously becomes even more daunting if you're just like an individual dev that wants to split. This is like you're not going to do this, right? But with this, you stream to the GitHub repo. They actually add a funding dot, and then when the developer wants to claim, funds can aggregate. When they're ready to claim, when it's enough that they're interested or have time, they add a funding.json file to the repo, and the Chainlink Oracle verifies that, and they choose the Ethereum address that they want to associate. So it really kind of flips the kind of requirement on onboarding and makes it so that it can happen at any time, and unlocks the funder to go fast. So the second thing is continuous funding is built in. A lot of folks are starting to experiment with funding through integrating separate solutions, but we think it's really powerful that it's integrated. Funds don't have to flow in and out of different smart contracts, different wrapped tokens, tokens that are wrapped multiple times. It's all built into the same system and built into a really nice UX in the app. Similarly, splitting is built in. Same deal here. A lot of folks are using splitting through third-party things like 0x splits, deploying separate contracts. In Drips, it's all part of the same system. And again, it's got this feature where the recipients are prompted to split onwards and reach deeper and deeper parts of the graph, so that as a funder, you can know that you're not just funding your direct dependencies, but you're actually funding the entire web or tree of dependencies underneath you. This is probably the part that we're most hopeful for in the long term, to truly create kind of a different cultural norm about supporting not just things you directly know and care about, but sort of an entire ecosystem underneath that by virtue of those folks as dependencies. And finally, lists are public. So this is also something we think is really cool. We hope to see more use of this, but especially around people curating just global lists. For example, around, this is Open Zeppelin's list in Drips, but you could imagine someone curating a list around, for example, privacy preserving open source projects in Ethereum or security projects. And then if that person is a thought leader, other people who are interested in giving funds but may not know where they want to give those funds to can go and use that as a signaling mechanism to know that their funds are being put to good use. So finally, this is some positive feedback we've gotten since we launched V2 late last year. I won't read all of these or even any of them, but they really get us fired up about where this can go. And we're just really grateful to all these awesome devs in our space for the love. So this is the last slide. And I don't know if I have a minute or two to answer questions, but I want to kind of leave this here. These are a few ideas. We're really excited to work with Filecoin, and it's super exciting to hear the talk so far that you all are looking to really double down on public goods funding and expand your work in that this year. So as from the Drips team, we are so excited to work with you on that. And here's a few ideas for how we can potentially collaborate together. One idea could be that Filecoin continuously shares a percentage of block rewards with its critical dependencies. This is that kind of optimism idea of sharing sequencer revenue. Another idea could be that Protocol Labs distributes a percentage of its native token over the next decade to critical software dependencies. This is kind of similar to what Radworks has done over this year using Drip so far. And a third idea is retroactively reward the open source projects and researchers that have contributed to your ecosystem. Because Drips kind of leaves the time scale of what you're recording open, of what you're supporting open, you can do retro stuff through Drips as well if you're interested. So that's it. And if I have a minute or two, maybe I'll just take some quick questions.
Yeah, that's just good.
Thanks.
This is really awesome. Quick question. What other projects or what other graphs other than GitHub are you considering? So for example, we rely on a lot of scientific research, and it'd be great to just scramble into the publication graph.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We were actually at the DSci Summit yesterday, presenting in their funding and mechanism track. We had an awesome conversation with the researchers there. One of the things the themes that came up over and over was that how the kind of interesting similarities between the citation tree in research and the open source dependency tree. And folks there had a lot of amazing ideas and a lot of excitement. I think I think we're really bullish on it. It's really, we just need to find funders who are interested in funding in that way. But actually talking with those folks, I don't see any reason why you couldn't just do this today. I mean, I think with that, those researchers would either have to, from an identity perspective, those researchers would either have to claim a GitHub repository or they'd have to onboard with Ethereum accounts or something else. But yeah, I would say there's no kind of, the app I think would work really smoothly for that use case if you had that just today. And it's an amazing idea. Yes.
For the first two, have you guys worked with any teams that are doing, even if other ecosystems like liquid staking or restaking, it's the way of blocking that and then just cycling off. So it's maybe the first 10% the staker keeps, so they have some kernel rate that they're going for, and then past that, they automatically contribute into funding public stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's actually kind of the setup with Octant, actually. I don't know if you know, Octant is an offshoot of the Golem project, and they're sort of a public goods, kind of the public goods spin-off or branch of Golem. Golem has just very quickly, Golem has a lot of ETH staked. I think it's a couple $100 million worth, and they receive a bunch of revenue from that, and then a part of that goes to Octant and is split in kind of I don't know if it's QF specifically, they've changed their mechanism a few times, but there's voting that happens basically, and then those funds flow to public goods mostly in the Ethereum ecosystem. And with Drips, the ones that flow to Drips actually flow to those dependencies that I was showing earlier. So that's essentially the Octant setup. And yeah, we want to talk to more DeFi projects and staking protocols to hopefully get more setups like that. Yes, or wow, there's three of you. Okay, yeah, I'll try to go quick.
Well, I mentioned that they're experimenting with funding specific people rather than just projects. Is that something that they're just looking to?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the neat things about this sort of abstracted or extensible identity system I mentioned. We really debated whether, when we first built the first kind of adapter that wasn't a NFT one or something, we had a lot of debate around whether to do GitHub first or GitHub users versus projects, or do Twitter profiles or something else. We've talked to the Passport team about doing this with any OAuth-based identity. And I think, the more interest we get in, and we decided on the GitHub projects, and I think that was the right choice. We've gotten a lot of love for that, but I'm quite excited about working with, either Passport or projects like Privy to do OAuth identities, like Twitter. And I think that would work really well, or even just user accounts in GitHub as well. But we've also thought about GitLab and also Radical once 1.0 launches. So there will be more of these kind of identity things coming, and I think going to individual users, will be a huge thing. Yes.
Yeah, I know it's kind of the uncomfortable question to answer, but
I love uncomfortable questions. Go for it.
No, actually, it's I think it's for the police position, but have you found out any thoughts on compliance? Because it's something that we kind of on our side is something when you receive funding from a pressure, very difficult to say which is the source of funds. I mean, what do you do with VAT and all these things? It becoming very complicated for India, at least for.
Yeah, we've thought quite a bit about that, and we've actually done quite a bit of work on KYC. So we're looking at adding some kind of native optional features for KYC to try to help people with this. It's kind of a complicated topic, so I might say find me afterwards. But yeah, the simple answer is we're going to try to provide some features specifically to help smooth that process, because that was another pain point for funders. But fundamentally, in terms of receiving funds, I actually don't think it's really any different from other. I mean, anytime you have an Ethereum address, you sort of have this problem, right, where someone can send funds to you. So
Yeah, I mean, if you know, then you can send them an invoice. But the thing is, when you receive funds from a lot of people that you don't know either in North Korea or wherever, it starts to be like more complicated.
yeah, but I guess my point is, like, even with like Tornado Cash, right, people started sending funds to just everybody through Tornado Cash. You can't refuse an ERC20 transaction or any transaction, right? So, but yeah, I think that's a fair point. It is maybe the problem is maybe could be more depending on how the splitting graph sort of emerges.
I think it's where the claim process is really helpful, because you can run grips entirely through the claim process, and then you could put the gating and KYC and regulatory checks and so on in the claim process and totally. So that would be that we're solving that.
Cool. Well, yeah, if there's something else, and I've probably taken a little bit more than my time, so thank you so much. And yeah, we're gonna be here all afternoon, so please come find us and chat. Thank you.